I was under the impression that he simply wanted to drop by and see Grandma. However, my grandson surprised me with this unforeseen question. Have you ever found yourself in one of those moments when the ambience of the room shifts dramatically? What happens when someone you've treasured for as long as memory serves, a person who occupies a unique corner of your heart, speaks words that transform your entire view of them? Indeed, that moment is forever imprinted in my mind. The intensity of his gaze as he spoke those words resonates even now. Before I reveal all the details, might I ask where you are joining us from? In which city or charming little town do you find yourself as you delve into my story? My heart is aflame with anticipation, for this tale is one that intertwines the threads of connection between hearts, soaring beyond the confines of distance. Could occur anywhere, and perhaps it has already taken place. On a serene Tuesday afternoon, the journey commenced. The sunlight streamed softly through the intricate lace curtains of my cozy dwelling, nestled just beyond the picturesque streets of Savannah. As I set a pot of chamomile tea on the stove, the soothing scent began to waft through the air. I occupied myself with folding a tidy stack of clean laundry, towels and Matthew's old sweatshirt, a relic from his last visit, when a sudden knock shattered the calm. Unexpected visits certainly add an element of intrigue, don't they? I was certainly not expecting anyone to show up. Judy, my neighbor, usually prefaced her visits with a phone call, whereas the mailman would simply bypass the formality of knocking. Upon opening the door, I was met with the sight of my grandson, his face adorned with a sheepish grin, a delicate bouquet of daisies held tightly in his hand. In that instant, my heart almost dissolved into warmth. "Mama Meg," he said, the name he'd given me in his younger days. "I hope I'm not interrupting. While I was in town, I thought I would stop by for a quick visit." Nearly 2 months had passed since I last beheld Matthew. At 28, he stands tall and lean, radiating a subtle confidence that brings to mind the cherished memories of his late grandfather. Though he now stands tall in the realm of adulthood, a gentle warmth remains in his gaze when it encounters mine, a subtle kindness that seems ever more rare among the youth of this era. I made it clear to him that he was never to intrude unannounced, as I graciously accepted the flowers and ushered him through the door. "Your presence is always welcomed here." He stepped into the living room, his gaze sweeping across the space, finally resting on the framed family photos that decorated the shelves. He looked at the picture of himself as a 5-year-old sitting on my lap at the beach and let out a soft laugh. I question whether I have ever been that small. As I placed the daisies in the vase, a smile danced upon my lips. "You truly proved to be a formidable challenge." He let out a soft chuckle as he settled into the familiar embrace of the well-worn armchair by the fireplace, the same one his grandfather had once claimed as his own. I noted the relaxed nature of his posture, the way he released any tension, as though this was the only place where he could truly be himself. For the next hour we indulged in a charming dialogue that wandered through a multitude of subjects, both weighty and light-hearted. In Charleston he found himself anchored by his apartment, a space he claimed as home, and a girl who had captured his attention, yet doubts danced in his mind regarding her intentions. And I listened with the depth of a grandmother's heart, filled with quiet understanding and the occasional knowing glance, unclouded by judgment. Finally, I prepared a pot of tea for us, and we took our places on the porch, observing the sky as it morphed into a stunning tapestry of gold. The warmth of the day slipped away, surrendering to the enchanting symphony of crickets as twilight embraced the world. The summer evening unfolded with a serene beauty, a moment so perfect that one yearns to hold on to it forever. In that instant, the course of everything shifted irrevocably. Matthew turned to me, an uncommon weight evident in his eyes. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice gentle, laced with a touch of reflection. "Could I ask you a question of a more personal kind?" I stared at him for what felt like an eternity, sensing a change in the atmosphere, yet the essence of it remained just out of reach. "Of course, my dear, do not hesitate to ask about anything that occupies your thoughts." He hesitated, a glimmer of doubt dancing in his gaze. His fingers glided over the edge of his cup, a momentary distraction as he stole a look at the lawn, before his eyes found their way back to mine. "Have you ever delved into the profound realms of solitude? Can one truly experience such deep solitude?" The inquiry echoed in my mind, distinct and piercing. Not because of any wrongdoing, but rather due to its rawness, its honesty, and the feeling that this transcended simple curiosity. It arose from a deep and resonant part of his being. I inhaled deeply, wrestling with the fleeting phrases that twirled tantalizingly beyond my grasp. Indeed, I finally spoke, my voice barely rising above a whisper, more times than I can remember. A prolonged hush surrounded us, filled with a sense of weightiness and a soothing embrace. He nodded slowly, and I observed a delicate shift in his expression, a glimmer of comprehension or maybe a whisper of consent. He conveyed that he had been encountering that rather frequently of late. I am convinced that this is the very reason I found my way here. I yearned for the presence of one who understands that unique stillness. I reached out, allowing my hand to softly settle upon his. His fingers emanated a comforting warmth, wrapping me in a sense of familiarity. I hold a profound comprehension that may not be immediately apparent to you. He held his gaze on our intertwined hands, savoring the moment, refusing to pull away. In that fleeting moment, the ambience shifted dramatically. In the stillness, a quiet metamorphosis took shape in every nook and cranny. A subtle bond hung in the air between us, a soft essence, neither overtly inappropriate nor clearly defined, yet unmistakably felt. In a heartbeat, the night morphed into something truly remarkable. Most certainly not. The next morning I stirred from my slumber, greeted by the soft scent of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was just a product of my imagination. The comforting scent that often filled my home in the days when my husband, Robert, was still with me. As I donned my robe and made my way down the hallway, the comforting sounds of clinking mugs and gentle humming enveloped me, promising the warmth of the morning. Matthew had already awakened. He stood at the stove, his bare feet meeting the cool floor, shirtless and dressed only in pajama bottoms, a subtle shy smile dancing on his lips as he noticed my presence. "Mama Meg," he said, "I hope you don't mind. I remembered how you liked your coffee. Just a hint of sweetness and dressed with cream. I have revealed everything." I was wrapped in a mixture of wonder and a soothing warmth that had been absent from my life for far too long. As I observed him in my kitchen, moving with ease and a casual demeanor, a surprising flutter of emotion stirred within me. Not the kind I expected from a morning after, but instead the feeling that emerges when something is new, ambiguous, yet oddly deeply known. "You were right," I responded, striving to steady my voice as I drew nearer to the table. Awakening to the image of a striking man brewing coffee for me is a moment I never expected to encounter once more. He released a gentle chuckle, handed me the mug, and settled into his chair opposite mine at the modest wooden table, a silent observer of countless meals, card games, and whispered exchanges over the years. The stillness that surrounded us was anything but unsettling. It carried a quiet yet profound intensity. It felt as though we were bound by an invisible thread, a sensation that slipped through our fingers whenever we tried to give it voice. His eyes searched for mine, and as they held, I felt the echo of the question from the previous night. The deep, unspoken stillness that resides just below the surface. The kind that emerges not from isolation, but from the lack of true acknowledgement. In that instant, I felt the deep impact of genuine recognition. At first, we chose to withhold our words on the subject. Our discussion shifted to the topic of my garden. He asked if the tomatoes were on their way. This year, I spoke of their challenges, and he graciously extended an offer to help with their replanting, should I desire it. For reasons I cannot fully comprehend, a seemingly straightforward offer stirred emotions within me, and yet it undeniably did. It might have been the soothing timbre of his voice that drew me in. As the afternoon unfolded, after a relaxed walk through the backyard and a simple lunch, I drifted into the den, flipping through the pages of vintage photo albums. He stepped in and took a seat beside me on the couch, our shoulders nearly touching, yet his presence filled the room entirely. "You always had that smile," he said, pointing to a worn photograph of Robert and me lounging on a picnic blanket, my cheeks radiant, my arms encircling my husband. "Your joy was unmistakably clear." I replied gently. We encountered our fair share of obstacles, yet he was a good man, loving me in a way that unequivocally affirmed my worth. Matthew's eyes met mine with a fierce intensity, compelling me to stop my restless flipping of the pages. "You remain deserving of such love." My thoughts were shrouded in uncertainty as I contemplated my reply. It appeared overly fragile, unsettlingly personal. My breath hitched in my throat, the atmosphere surrounding us thick and electric with an unvoiced tension that seemed both fresh and hauntingly familiar, as if it had been silently building all this time. I placed the album on the table and stood up, yearning for a moment of solitude, but Matthew lingered beside me. "Dearest matriarch." "Megan," he murmured, his fingers wrapping softly around my wrist. "The sentiments I expressed last night remain steadfast. I found myself here weighed down by feelings that slipped through my grasp, compelling me to seek a path through their complexities. I've been pondering existence through a fresh lens, considering the bonds we share, and the genuine nature of belonging to someone else." His voice was devoid of desperation. It was heartfelt. I should have pressed him to stop, to guide the conversation elsewhere. Yet I found myself gazing up at him, the distance between us narrowing as we stood so close, and I whispered, "I understand exactly what you mean." He stayed motionless just as I did, but the air around us transformed again like a wave surging through. "I wish for you to know that you are not alone," he said thoughtfully. I took a deep breath. "I would like to elucidate matters for you." "I am not," he responded. "Not when it concerns the emotions I experience in your presence." My heart pounded fiercely in my chest. I had arrived at the age of 76. I have encountered a multitude of experiences in life: loss, grief, love, and devotion. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the quiet longing that lingered in Matthew's eyes. It surpassed the boundaries of simple longing. It was a yearning for the warmth of an embrace from someone who truly grasped the intricacies of your soul. In that moment, I understood I was wrestling with the identical longing. The echoes of our conversation faded into the stillness of the night. He busied himself with dinner while I remained on the porch, trying to untangle the emotions that had subtly wrapped around me like ivy creeping through an old window. As he took his place beside me, we shared a meal in serene silence, the stars shimmering overhead, while the cicadas provided a gentle serenade in the background. As he readied himself to retire for the night, he paused in the hallway, stealing a glance my way. "Shall we resume our dialogue tomorrow?" "Indeed," I confirmed. "Rest well, Mama Meg." "Rest peacefully, Matthew." In the quiet of the night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the echo of his words looping endlessly in my thoughts. "You remain deserving of such love." After many years, I found myself reflecting on the nature of love at this point in life, where the body may have matured, yet the heart continues to be open and welcoming. The next day emerged with a rare gentleness, as though the very walls of the house had attuned themselves to the profound stillness that hung in the air between us. Not the uncomfortable kind, but a gentle sort, reminiscent of a curtain swaying in the breeze, ready to be pulled aside. Matthew remained ensconced in his dreams far longer than usual. I held back from interjecting. Instead, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, my hands immersed in the rhythmic kneading of dough, an act devoid of necessity, yet serving as a distraction from the unyielding cycle of familiar thoughts that plagued my mind. What were the words we exchanged last night? Which words lingered in silence? And perhaps most importantly, what was its meaning? As he finally stepped inside, his hand sweeping away the last traces of sleep, his voice emerged gentle and welcoming. An enchanting fragrance permeates the atmosphere. "It's just bread," I said, turning to look him in the eye. "I thought it might be wise to keep my hands busy." He stepped up to the counter and leaned in beside me, his closeness more personal than required. The warmth radiated from him, causing my breath to catch before I could compose myself. He took note. Of course he did. Still, he chose to say nothing. He asked, "How about a drive later? Maybe we could head down to the lake?" I nodded in assent. Such a prospect would truly be a source of joy, and so we moved forward. After lunch, we gathered a simple picnic basket brimming with grapes, cheese, and a bottle of refreshing tea. And then we ventured down the twisting country road that led to the lake where I had once taken him fishing in my younger days. He kept mostly to himself during the journey. He kept stealing glances at me, as though he were still piecing together an enigmatic puzzle. As the sun sank gracefully toward the horizon, we reached the lake. The tranquility wrapped around the landscape, interrupted solely by the soft cries of far-off birds, resonating over the water's surface. The golden light danced upon the surface as we nestled onto a charming wooden bench at the water's edge. It was a place where secrets nestled comfortably in the shadows. After an extended period of quietude, he finally discovered his voice. Once, I held the conviction that love followed a prescribed set of rules. I shot him a sideways look, curiosity piqued. Are there any guidelines? Truly, he observed. As though it were fated to unfold among certain people, at a precise moment in their lives, adhering to a unique shape. Yet, I have come to realize that love remains unaffected by such concerns. He chose a petite stone and hurled it into the water. It ricocheted twice before vanishing beneath the surface. I'm not expressing this to confuse you, he continued. It might appear strange, yet in your company, I struggle to perceive you as anything other than a mirror of my grandmother. It feels as if I am looking at someone who understands me in a way that no one else ever has. His words coiled like a vine around my heart. I opened my mouth only to close it again. I endeavored to push it away. I felt an urge to express that it was just a transient instance, or maybe the resonance of loneliness articulating itself. Nevertheless, I discovered that I could not, for deep within my soul, I too had felt it. I whispered softly, "You've become a man. You have seen beyond the confines of my past identity. That undoubtedly carries weight." Once again we were wrapped in a cocoon of silence, our shoulders softly brushing against one another. "I have no desire to overstep," he whispered, his eyes locked on the shimmering surface of the water. Your presence evokes a profound authenticity within me that remains elusive in any other setting." I cast a fleeting look his way. His expression was open and genuine, devoid of simple yearning, yet rich with a deep significance. A profound yearning for acknowledgement, for closeness, for the experience of true genuineness. "Never did I envision that those words would escape your lips," I admitted. "Yet, I never envisioned that a spark of feeling would stir within me again. Especially at this juncture. Your presence is a profound reminder of my own being, Matthew." I reached out my hand to him gently, and he permitted me to take hold of it. "From the very beginning," I murmured, "you carried within you a gentle spirit." At this moment, the emotions surging within me are unlike anything I've ever felt, casting a shadow of uncertainty over how to traverse this uncharted territory. "There's no obligation for us to act," he observed. "I long to be by your side in any manner you allow." We remained suspended in that moment as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with a violet hue. The lake shimmered in soft hues and I felt the change again. Not sudden, not jarring, simply steady like the receding tide. As we stepped back into the house, I lit a few candles in the living room, hoping to chase away the creeping darkness. He helped me prepare a light dinner, and afterward we sank into the couch, the photo album still spread open from our last meeting. He stayed largely quiet, softly leaning his head against my shoulder, and I permitted it to unfold. I should have anticipated this outcome. In that fleeting moment there lingered a sense of return, a resurgence from love, from memory, from the very fabric of existence. As he stood to bid the day farewell, he lingered for a moment, directing his gaze towards me and said, "I'm glad I came here." I echoed his sentiment in return. As the house fell into silence and solitude wrapped around me again in my room, I found myself perched by the window, staring into the profound darkness of the night. The feelings churning inside me had evolved into an ineffable power, a fusion of allure and trepidation that took me by surprise. What transpires when two spirits find comfort in one another, even as the world struggles to understand? The solution danced just out of reach, while the inquiry remained, steadfast and unyielding, refusing to dissolve into obscurity. As the first light of dawn approached, I awoke early, before the sun had a chance to rise. The house remained quiet, wrapped in the tranquil embrace of the early morning, exuding a sense of solemnity. I slipped into my robe and glided quietly down the hallway, pausing momentarily at the threshold of the guest room. I remained still, listening intently to the soft, rhythmic breaths that drifted through the divide. A fragment of my being longed to press on with my journey. A solitary fragment lingered. As Matthew emerged from the depths of his dreams, the kettle's insistent whistle pierced the quietude of the morning. I poured the tea and set the cups upon the table, striving to soothe the storm that had begun to stir within me. In these quiet moments a certain sweetness lingered, him here in my home, moving through its spaces as if he belonged, as if this was the way fate had always intended for things to unfold. Yet that sweetness was increasingly caught in a tangible fear. Upon his arrival in the kitchen, I observed a softness in his gaze that had escaped my memory, as though the tranquility of the morning had calmed something deep within him too. "Good morning, Mama Meg," he said, the name now carrying a fresh sense of affection. "Good morning, my dear," I responded. We remained in quietude for a few moments, simply savoring our tea and absorbing the tranquility, until he finally set his cup aside and locked eyes with me from across the table. "Last night, slumber slipped through my fingers." I nodded in assent. "I feel the same way. I found myself pondering," he remarked, his tone deliberate. "The essence of our connection, the intricate dance that plays out between us. I recognize that it's not a matter easily defined, yet I will not pretend it lacks significance." I peered into the abyss of my cup. The steam spiraled and curled, stirring a feeling of curiosity. For countless years, I have discovered within myself a yearning for what has slipped away. I articulated with a deliberate cadence. Yearning for your grandfather, desiring the comforting embrace of recognition, the soft touch of belonging. I hid those longings, convinced that it was what society expected of women at my stage in life. Matthew reached out, his hand brushing against mine as he clasped it softly across the table. His touch radiated a consistent warmth. "There's no need for you to continue concealing them," he observed. Moisture gathered at the corners of my eyes. I loathed the unrefined nature of my feelings, the fragility that rendered me so bare. Amidst the chaos there existed a comforting embrace, a sanctuary that granted me the freedom to express the thoughts I had long held in silence. "I never thought it possible to forge a bond with another soul," I whispered. "This is not the path, nor is it the approach." He held my hand with a gentle embrace. "You are no longer alone." The day unfolded with a deliberate, purposeful rhythm. We stepped into the garden. He lent his hand in nurturing the roses and in renewing the stakes for the tomatoes. The sound of our laughter resonated through the air, surpassing the impact of any words we might have spoken. He stained his shirt and pretended to be upset, but I knew it didn't genuinely trouble him. The kind of work that links your hands to the earth changes you in deep and meaningful ways. Grounds you. It makes the truth more accessible. Following dinner that evening, I donned a light cardigan and stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a radiant veil of silver over the landscape. The door creaked open, its sound echoing in the stillness, and soon after Matthew appeared, slipping into position beside me. "May I pose a question to you?" he asked. "Absolutely." He stared into the dark expanse of night, his hands resting on the aged wooden railing. "Had the circumstances shifted, and I were not your grandson, would your sentiments still hold true?" For a moment I paused, weighing my words carefully before I replied. Not from a place of ignorance, but rather because the truth carried a burden that was hard to endure. "At long last, I proclaimed, I shall." He turned to me, his expression open, searching. "I don't think it's wrong to love someone who loves you back," he remarked, "even if the world may never understand it." I nodded in assent. Not all things in this world demand understanding. At times, love reveals itself quietly, a tender bond emerging between two spirits who gradually find each other. We remained in stillness for a prolonged moment, listening to the symphony of crickets and the murmuring leaves. In that instant, time seemed to freeze, liberated from the constraints of urgency or expectation, wrapped in a shared comprehension, a profound emotional intimacy that had etched its own unique space in the fabric of life. Imperfect maybe, but undeniably genuine. Eventually, we settled onto the time-worn porch swing, where he gently wrapped an arm around me. My head softly rested against his shoulder. The atmosphere was suffused with the delicate fragrance of honeysuckle, wafting softly through the air. In that moment, time appeared to freeze. The shadow of tomorrow hangs before us, cloaked in enigma. I am left speechless, struggling to find the right words to define this bond or capture its true nature. It may be that we shall not, but I hold this certainty close to my heart. Love often comes crashing in, unannounced and unexpected. In moments of stillness, it finds you. At times, it remains hidden for years, tucked away in the creases of aged photo albums and the dim corners of neglected memories, only to resurface into the light once more. Occasionally, it shows up at your threshold, carrying daisies and presenting an unforeseen inquiry. However, when it arrives at last, the feeling is undeniable. Perhaps it is unnecessary for you to proceed in that manner.